Hi guys, and welcome back to The Wargamer. And in this video I'm going to be showing you how to assemble Rubicon kits. Now I've assembled quite a few of these kits from Rubicon Models, so I thought I'd share with some of the tips and guidelines that I've found when assembling these miniatures. And the kit that I'm using in this particular video will be the SU85 to SU122 kit. So let's get started, and first of all take a look at the instruction booklet. When assembling any Rubicon kit, the instruction booklet should be the first port of call. The reason for this is because many of these kits come with different options. This particular one allows you to assemble the SU85 and also the SU122 as well. So you need to make sure you know exactly which components are going to be used for each one. So if I just flick through to the instructions, you'll see that each of these steps are numbered, and actually when we start coming to the optional steps, we have these numbers and also a letter as well. So each of the A steps will represent the SU85 and each of the B steps will represent the SU122. And you can see this carried on throughout the rest of the instruction booklet. So it's very worthwhile spending a little bit of time studying exactly which components you'll need for your variant, because there's nothing worse than halfway through building you realize you've actually been sticking the wrong components for the make or model of the vehicle you're actually trying to assemble. You may also notice that throughout this instruction booklet that all of these components have a number and a letter. Now the number associates with the component number on the actual sprue, and the letter is actually an indicator of the actual sprue itself. And on the front here you can see we have the three sprues that we get in this set, and each one has an associated letter. So it's definitely worthwhile knowing which sprue has got each letter, and you can see them quite clearly on here. On the front as well, I'll also point out these individual little pictograms and little symbols at the bottom. So you have different things like this one represents a choice of components, this one represents optional components. Do not glue this component. That's usually for if you've got the turret and you don't want to actually glue it so you can still move it around. We also have drill holes. Some components require you to drill an additional hole in there. Some components need to be bent, and also some components are quite delicate. So do take care when cutting those particular components. So that's the actual instructions looked at. Let's move on to the sprues themselves. So before you can actually start building your miniature, you first of all need to start removing the components from the sprue. So looking at your instruction booklet, you need to find exactly which components you need. And for this, I'm going to be using my clippers. So this is like a standard pair of hobby clippers. You can see we've got a flat side and also a tapered side. So we want to press the flat side of the clippers against the component itself, because these are quite flatter areas, and gently squeeze until we remove the component from the struts. So we're going to be doing this for all of this, the entirety of this component. And once that's done, we can then use a hobby knife to clean up the component itself. So you may notice that there's a few struts and bumps where we've removed it from the actual sprue itself, but also there's going to be maybe mold lines as well that need to be removed using a hobby knife. Now you can use a hobby file for this, but personally I prefer a hobby knife because it offers a lot more control. Now what I'm using here is actually a scalpel, because it's a lot easier to get hold of the blades. They're also cheaper, and they're incredibly sharp as well, which also means you need to be very careful when using a scalpel, as you don't want to slice your fingers. And I've got the scars to prove it as well. So generally cut away for yourself, and if you're actually struggling to do the cut, then you're probably using the wrong tool or your blade isn't sharp enough. So we want to pretty much do this for all the components we need for each step. So as you can see here in the instruction booklet, I'm going to be removing this component here, A04 and also A01, before I start assembling the tracks. However, do not assemble the tracks straight away. I'll be coming to that later on in the video, because it makes it a lot easier to paint if you keep the tracks separate. So I'm going to be removing a few more components, and then we can move on to gluing. So here we have the components that I've cleaned and prepared, and these can now be glued together. Now, if you only learn one thing from the entirety of this video, if you only remember one thing, then please make sure it's this step, because this is extremely important. So when I first started assembling my Rubicon miniatures, as I would expect from a plastic kit, I started using this glue. And this is just Revell Contact Professional, which is brilliant for most miniatures, providing they are polystyrene, because this is a polystyrene cement. However, these miniatures are not polystyrene. These miniatures are ABS plastic, so this doesn't really work very well. The way this works normally is it basically melts the polystyrene and kind of welds them together almost by kind of fixing the two melted pieces of plastic together. It doesn't work like that on this glue, on this kind of plastic. It will stick them together, but it won't create a very nice strong bond, and some fiddly bits you'll find that they keep falling off all the time. So it's a hard-learned lesson, but I highly recommend do not use this. Instead, on these kind of plastics, you need to make sure you use an ABS plastic glue. One such type of glue which works quite well is plastic magic, which can actually be used on ABS and also polystyrene plastics as well. So this comes with a nice little handy brush applicator, you can see just there, so you can quite easily and precisely apply the glue. Now, before we actually do any gluing, what you want to do is you want to dry fit your components. So that basically take these two components, fit them together, make sure they sit flush, and also this gives a good idea if you've got any sections which might need to be trimmed down if they're not sitting quite as flush as you want. So once you're happy with the fit, you should also take note as to where the two areas actually join, because this is where you'll be actually applying the plastic. So in this case, it'll be around the edge here, and if you just fit them together, you can see exactly that they stick together. So I'm going to take one side of the component here, and take my glue, make sure I've got plenty of glue on the edge, and then I'm going to run this along the edges of the plastic that I know the glue needs to go. A little bit more. So you need to make sure that you apply enough for the join to be solid, but not too much, because you can actually have the opposite effect if you use too much glue, I've found. So once you've applied enough glue, take your second component and then press them together carefully. Make sure you don't get any glue on the areas that you don't actually want to be glued, and then firmly press them together and hold them together for a few seconds, applying pressure, and this will give you a really nice, firm, strong hold. So that with the first component looked at, let's start assembling and gluing the rest of these components. So here we have most of the SU-122 assembled. Now there's a couple more tips that you should be aware of when assembling your Rubicon models. Now early on in the assembly, it actually tells you to glue the tracks to the main hull, and I would suggest ignoring that instruction. You can see here, these actually just clip on these little rods here. These just slot in quite easily there. So if you want to kind of keep it solid whilst you're assembling, you can, but it makes it so much easier to paint these sections if they're separate, because it means that you're not having to try and reach into the crevice to get all these track sections. You can keep them separate, you can apply your weathering to them, you can apply weathering to the inside, where you can see we've even got detailing as well, which would be obscured if you glued the tracks on at the early stage. So definitely keep those separate. In addition to that, we also have a few more tips as well in regards to gluing on movable objects. Now, in most vehicles, you'll find it has a full turret which can spin. It's obviously quite useful to be able to spin around your turret, because you can remove it if you want to show it's destroyed. If you're using it for wargaming, you can repose it. You can also paint various areas underneath, a lot easier if the turret is removable. So the same principle goes for these kind of gun mantlets as well. So this is the main kind of gun has been assembled, but the mantlet hasn't actually been applied to the tank itself. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we can still move the gun up and down while still affixing it in place. So first of all, you need to take your gun, place it into the component that it's required, and then you need to bring in the locking component. In this case, it's just this one here. Place it over the top and take note of where the joins occur, because what you want to do is you want to make sure that you don't actually apply any glue to the areas that need to move. You can see here we've got a section here that needs to move. We don't want to apply any glue to there. We just want to glue this section to this section here. So we're going to remove this for now. Bring in our plastic magic again, and just place some of the glue carefully on the areas that we know won't need to actually move. So another great thing about this plastic magic is this little paintbrush that you get in here is very, very precise in how you can actually apply the glue as well. So once that's done, we can then bring in our two pieces. We can carefully place the gun in place, lock it there, hold it in place, and then bring in the second component here, and then again place that like so. Now, one thing I would recommend as well, once you actually glued them like this, is to move this up and down, because if any glue is accidentally dripped onto here, by moving this up and down, it'll stop it from locking in place and keep that movement free. So again, just hold this in place for a few seconds until it's done, the glue has done its job. So that concludes this quick video on assembling Rubicon kits. Hopefully you'll avoid some of the mistakes that I made when I first started assembling these vehicle kits, and you'll have a better time and more enjoyable experience as a result of it. So if you enjoyed this video, please do let me know in the comments below, and also include a link to the Rubicon Models web store in there as well. So all that's left to say is thanks for watching, and goodbye.